The LA Kings have surprised a few people with their fast start, but it hasn't always been consistent. Eddie Garcia of Locked On LA Kings is here to talk about that and what it'll take for the Kings to keep winning going forward. All that and more next on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On LA Kings, Eddie Garcia. And Eddie, you've got to be pretty happy with the start that the LA Kings have had this year, even though there have been a few hiccups along the way.
Yeah, I think overall that I'm pretty happy with the way they've started. I think in particular for two reasons. Number one, they started the season on an extended road trip. Crypto.com Arena, their home, formerly Staples Center, was undergoing some major renovations. The Kings did not have a home preseason game. They had their end of training camp was actually in Quebec. And then they started the year with 7 straight games on the road. And so, considering how that started, so many games away from home, they finished that road trip 3-2-2. So not bad. And considering that they lost their stalwart on the blue line, future Hall of Famer Drew Doughty broke his ankle in the final game of that road trip. And they've had to deal with life without him, a guy who, even at his advanced age, was just ate up so many minutes and did so many things, penalty kill, power play, and of course, being on the top pairing as well. So considering the long road trip and the loss of Drew Doughty, to be 9-4-3 at this point, and even though they played a few more games than Vegas, first place in the Pacific, yeah, overall, I think everybody's pretty happy. There's always things to improve on, and then you mentioned there were a couple of weird losses. But overall, yes, I think everybody's pretty happy with the way the season started so far for the LA Kings.
Who has stepped up in Doughty's absence to keep this team humming?
I think it has been a collective effort, which we thought it would be. I think if you were going to point to one player in particular, it would probably be defenseman Mikey Anderson. He's not a spectacular player. He doesn't give you much offensively, but he's a rock defensively. And he's elevated his game, playing more minutes, actually been teamed up several times with Vladislav Gavrikov, who has moved from the left side to the right side, and they've been a pretty formidable duo. Mostly defensive defensemen, although the defense has actually chipped in surprisingly with some goals. But I think if you were going to point to one guy, I would say Mikey Anderson, but it really has been a collective effort from the entire defensive core. There was, as you would expect, some growing pains early on, but they've really kind of come into their own of late and have kind of become a really nice cohesive unit. And it has been kind of by committee that everybody has come together. Obviously, everybody's minutes have gone up a bit. But again, if you're going to point to one guy, I'd go Mikey Anderson.
And how about offensively? I mean, who have been some of the guys who have surprisingly been productive early this season?
Well, if you're going to look, at the forward group, I think the guy that jumps off the page is Alex Laferriere. People may not know him, and they may confuse him with Alexis Lafreniere on occasion when you see the last name. But he was a young guy who had a nice career at Harvard. So he's gone through the college process. So he's a little bit older for a guy who's only in his second year. Last year made the team in a big surprise. Ended up playing 81 of 82 games. And had a nice rookie season, nothing spectacular, but nice, 12 goals. But this year, he got an opportunity to start the year on the top line and the top power play unit, which was a great opportunity for him. Now, it didn't last long, as it turned out, because Quentin Byfield, which we can get into later, was kind of struggling at center. So they moved him back on the wing and they moved LaFerriere back down to the third line. But it hasn't stopped his production at all. He's got 9 goals so far on the season in 16 games. He had 12 goals in 81 games last year. So he's leading the team in goals. Nobody saw that coming. I thought he had a great opportunity to maybe be a 20-goal scorer. Now I think at this point, I'll actually be disappointed if he doesn't get to 30. So yeah, he's a guy that a lot of people might not know about, but is having a really great season early on. And I do want to point out a guy that fans might know about, and that's defenseman Brandt Clarke, former high draft pick, had a great season in the AHL last year, has had a little taste of the NHL here and there. But so far on the season, he's got 13 points in 16 games. He's quarterbacking the number 1 power play unit in Drew Doughty's absence. And he just brings an element the Kings haven't had from their blue line in a while, a creative, fun, exciting player. I mean, he actually, though, has played better defense than I thought he would be. He's not just all kind of flash, but he's got that in his game, which the Kings don't have a lot of on their blue line, especially with Drew Doughty out. So a couple of young guys that have really, really helped out. Alex LaFerriere in the forward group and Brandt Clarke on the defense.
You mentioned Quinton Byfield. Has he gotten back on track, and to what extent?
Well, they have moved him back to center, which is where they want him to play. He did get his first goal of the season the other night. Actually, he had goals in back-to-back games, so that was certainly encouraging. Didn't score in their last game against Columbus. So hopefully he's kind of gotten that off the schneid a bit and has some confidence growing. I thought even though he didn't score against the Blue Jackets in their last game, he did look more aggressive. He's going to be a very good player. There's a lot of expectations on him. There are Kings fans that continue to be impatient with him. Eventually he's going to get there. It may not be as quickly as some would like, but I still have a lot of confidence in his ability. He's a very creative, unique player with a lot of size and a big reach. But has his season started the way a lot of people would have liked? No, including him. But I think he'll be okay. I will say this: if he can turn it on and kind of take it to the next level, that would be a huge, huge plus for the LA Kings to be a much more dangerous team than they are.
Talk to me about the power play. It struggled at times. I'm assuming Doughty's absence is a contributing factor, but what are they not doing well on the power play that has it ranked 22nd in the league right now?
It was really awful to start. It's gotten slightly better, but not much. It's the one real area that the Kings are deficient in so far on the season, and it hasn't flowed very well. Sometimes they just take too long getting it set up to begin with. And it's just the production just isn't there. They're doing some things different recently. Kevin Fiala is a guy they've been trying to set up a lot, and he can be a very dangerous threat. But it seems like once it starts getting a little bit better, then they take a step back, and that's the one glaring weakness the Kings have right now. And if they're going to contend with some of the really elite teams in the league, the power play's got to get better. If it isn't, they're not going to be able to hang in there, because right now it's been a negative for them.
What else is necessary to sustain this strong start?
I think probably, kind of a more balanced effort. Trevor Moore was a 30-goal scorer last year. He's got 2 goals in the season. I mentioned Quinton Byfield was a 20-goal scorer last year. He's got 2 as well. So I think those 2 guys getting going certainly would help. And just being more consistent overall. Their last game against Columbus, they had a terrible first period, and then they turned it on in the second and third and were able to win fairly easily. But just they're a good team, but they're not a team that can take periods off, or else they're going to get stung. And we've seen it a few times this season. They lost to the San Jose Sharks, which at the time was the worst team in the NHL. And then a few nights later, they lost to the Chicago Blackhawks, who, because of a loss to the Sharks, the Blackhawks at the time were the worst team in the NHL. So when you look at those 2 losses, those are 2 head scratchers. And it just kind of goes to show for the Kings that if they're not on the top of their game every night for 3 periods, they can stub their toe from time to time.
All right, Eddie, I know you'll have the rest of the season covered every step of the way. Why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Well, obviously, you can find Locked On LA Kings anywhere you find your podcasts. And we're also on YouTube. I would just say search if you're looking for it. Make sure you search LA Kings. If you just search Kings, you might find a basketball team from Northern California. Yeah, if you want to follow the show, we're at Locked On LA Kings on X and Twitter as well.
All right, Eddie, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
All right, Gil, thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. One of my favorite features on the Game Time app is the view from your seat. You go on the app and you could see a panoramic view from your seat before you purchase the tickets, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Now, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.